welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G, and I'm here every Monday night at 8 p.m. on WEMS Radio, bringing you conversations with guests from all walks of life with different perspectives. And we talk about life, we talk about love, and we talk about spirituality. And we talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? And when we look at the world with so many things going on, I say we need a whole lot of support in living our best life. We talk about spiritual practices that work for you. I talk about the spiritual toolkit. What's in your personal spiritual toolkit? And different practices work for different people. My guests, they share what their go-to practices are. And you get to shift and move and try different type of practices to support you when you need clarity, when you need joy, when you feel disconnected. So I hope that in sharing with you, you find some tools to support you in accessing joy in life. And I always like to say, and living your best life with grace and ease. You can find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason, and I'm on Instagram as Rev Grenetta with inspirational messages to support you through the day. You can take a moment and just check in. So I hope that you can find a way to support you during these times. And we have been through some times, right? So I am here each week with messages and guests to share resources and be with you on Monday nights at 8 p.m. I'm excited tonight to have Diamond Butler as my guest. Diamond is an educator. She's an advisor to the Peace Corps. And I'm excited to have her here to talk about what she's done and share resources with us. Hey, Diamond.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. So glad to be here with you.
Yes, it's so nice to see your face. I haven't seen you it's like we see each other, but being in person, it's been some years, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So I talked about, well, introduce yourself and talk about what passionate project you're working on now.
That's a good one. What passion projects I'm working on? So I'm Diamond Butler, Minister Diamond Butler in some spaces as well. As far as passion projects, last year I did 3 weddings. So that's something that I wasn't uh, necessarily sure if we would start off on that step, but we absolutely can. Um, I was asked by my niece to do her wedding. After that, I was asked for my cousin to do his wedding and my other cousin to do their wedding.
Mm-hmm.
That was something over the years people would ask for me to do that service, and I would say I don't necessarily have that credential as of yet.
Mm-hmm.
I always was thinking about it in the traditional sense of
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be the ordained minister, and you need to be on record with as the clergy from a particular church.
Mm-hmm.
But that has evolved a lot now
A
when you
lot, yeah.
in that field. So I'm passionate to think about the way in which bringing together couples in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I am a board member for organization Statement Junkie. We give passports to girls of color. And so I'm passionate as I continue to think about that and those resources and just the opportunity I have in my everyday vocation as well too, as a senior director of best practices and impact for global kids and the opportunities we're able to give our young people about that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm very passionate when it comes to um, young people and community development.
And I know you've traveled extensively, right? How did you get involved? Take us to the beginning of how you chose and decided that you wanted to go to the Peace Corps, right? And because you hear a lot about it, but I think you might be the first person that I've met, right, that have actually gone. So it's fascinating and interesting how you chose and what were the steps for you doing that.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to speak more about that. And growing up, I had a skewed perspective of what a Peace Corps volunteer was and what it
I
meant
probably did too.
too. So I always imagined, it was just somebody scurrying in and out of a hut and not interacting with the people. Volunteers didn't look like me either, was
Yeah.
another thing. So my entire perception of it was skewed. I have a cousin who works in international development who didn't take the path of Peace Corps, and she had mentioned it to me when I was talking about wanting to do more in travel and international development. I'm like, why she told me to think about it if that wasn't the path she took.
Right, right.
And not to say it was necessarily bad or good. It was just like I said, as far as my perception, I had never thought about it. So fast forward a few years, I was running youth programming for the community at the United Palace for quite some time.
Mhm.
And I just said, I love doing this work, but I would like to expand on it. And I just wanted to see some other areas in which I could um, reach to do that type of work.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking I had recently led a trip to South Africa with a group of young people through
Mhm.
the YMCA of Greater New York Global Teens program at the time.
Mhm.
And it was the first place that I've been, although I had started doing traveling where I said, I could see myself staying here
Oh,
for a
okay.
while. I was like, I could see myself staying here for a little while,
Mhm.
projects, not just like a one off, go in type of situation, but really thinking about how it could maybe develop and blossom and have that cross cultural perspective of it. And on that same trip, I had a friend, Fernand Hirado, who was a returned Peace Corps volunteer himself.
Mm.
And I said, I think I might want to do the Peace Corps. And he's
Mhm.
like, oh my goodness, you'll be great. I've been waiting for the day you would say you would do the Peace
Right.
Corps. And fast forward, I'm the 2020 Franklin H. Williams Award winner for an award that the Peace Corps only gives every 4 years to volunteers of color,
Mhm.
and been able to do extensive work. So I applied, and I originally thought I was going to Madagascar.
Mm.
During my interview, they said, well, if you really want to go to Madagascar, we'll put the nomination in for it, but we think you would be great for Comoros.
Mhm.
And it was a video such as this, and my eyes kind of cut to the left or the right.
Right. Right. Right.
I just didn't see, that option coming. So
Mhm.
I was with the first group of volunteers back there, and after 20 years of them not being in that particular country, and
Mhm.
Comoros is located next to Tanzania and Madagascar. It's an island country,
Mhm.
and it was amazing experience. I think about the work there and still connected to the people.
Mhm.
So that was a little bit about, I guess, the steps of the journey.
That's
And I wouldn't mind elaborating, but
Mm.
yes.
How did you have to prepare for that? You just for such an adventure, right?
Oh yes, the preparation part of it, right? Yes.
Yeah. Huh?
So yes, we had the interview for it, and it can take a couple of months before you're leaving. So if I recall, I got the invitation in December or January. I left in that June
Mm.
for it. So had a little under 6 months. Yeah, a little under 6 months to prepare because I left early June at that too for
Mhm.
it. So, you have to receive your medical clearances, and that includes dental as well too.
Mhm.
And I had wisdom teeth at the time.
Mm.
Wisdom teeth came out. But that's not the case for everybody, but just for
Right, right.
some of the preventative work that was done based
Mhm.
off of conversations with my dentist. That's what happened. Stole
Mhm.
my car. I was like,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
want to have to deal with worrying about who or what is taking care of my car for
Moving it, right?
6 months. You
Right.
know, it's not going on vacation and worried about alternate side of the street parking in New York for a week.
Right.
It
It's
could be enough. So in this case,
right.
I said, sell my car, attempted to sublease my apartment, um, because that went in another direction while I was while I was in Peace Corps. But I said, God makes so many ways for us. He'll make another way if things don't happen. So
Mhm. It's
uh,
all in how we look at it, as you said, right? It's not
absolutely
neither good or bad. If we're looking for, there's an opportunity in it, right? But sometimes we have to have that moment where we're like, oh no, right? But
right, right,
right, it,
absolutely.
we can shift, right? And know
Yes.
that, yeah.
Like you say in the moment, you go, oh my goodness, your teachings and your mantras and the things you say to yourself sometimes goes out the window when you went
Right,
for a
right. No.
loop. So because my prayer is always this or something better. That's what I always
Mhm.
try to tell myself, in preparation for something, and thinking about just the possibilities that's out there for us.
Mhm.
But when I did get that message while I was in Peace Corps that the apartment that I was subleasing just about 3 months into
Mhm.
it, that there
Mhm.
was an issue, I was like, okay, so I see
Mhm.
this is not gonna work.
Mhm.
Um, but like I was blessed for an opportunity to purchase as far as for a co-op later on down the line, right?
Yeah,
So you see,
yeah,
hold on
exactly.
to a rental property, you have your mind made up and you think of things, and here it was leading me to a path of home ownership, and I didn't even
Yeah.
know at the time.
Right. That's why we said there's that opportunity in it. And it's like, and I talk about spiritual practices from how we're keeping ourselves sane, right? And how we're living in this world and be able to smile and find some
Yes,
joy and serve. And it's just a chaotic world right now, right? And so we try to share ways with people that support them. And that's what the spiritual practices I talk about,
mhm,
having a spiritual background. We look out in the world, there's like mental health issues. They're like kids are lost. It's so much. But with our connection to God and staying faithful in that, right, we find the ways to live in the world, right? Because I can smile, I have joy. And
absolutely.
and every there are moments when things are going all kind of ways, right?
Mhm.
But there's still access to finding that joy, right? And two, I think as you practice, I'm practicing too, not to stay in that moment. And I'm learning over time you can shift a lot faster and more. I'm shifting faster and faster and understanding that it doesn't have to be as it seems in that moment, you know?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, this is why the mantras, the affirmations, our prayer work, all of those things, it really is like you say, the toolkit, talking about having those items there. It's just like your toolbox in your house. It's not like you're necessarily walking around with a hammer or a wrench or pliers every time, but
Yeah.
what happens if something happens?
Mhm.
That's the time in which you have to go into that toolkit and use it.
Mhm.
And guess what? If nothing happened, you would never use it, right?
Right, exactly. That's it, right?
So
It's true.
same concept. And even with all that we may see in this world, we have to remember that we have to pour into it everything that we want to see and manifest into it. And it can be difficult sometimes, especially when many people want to remind you of all the things that seem like just a downward.
Right,
A lot of
exactly.
people like to try to live in that realm of downward, and then they ask, well, why is this still happening to me? And it's like, well, you're laying in it. You're
Yeah,
supposed to live in it.
right. That's one way of saying it, right?
You
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
so when we try to continue to create that world and that experience, what we want to see, what we want to feel, what we experience, it immediately will lighten whatever load and the things that we see and experience as well too. It may not take away the current reality, right? But it
Right.
reaffirms the truth and the truth about us,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It just came to mind. So when you in the Peace Corps, the way you lived there, the impact of coming back here, what was that like for you in the way we live here? You know?
Wow, it was very it was indeed an adjustment for me. I remember
Mm.
when I came back here, I remember one moment where I was just standing in Penn Station, not even Penn Station in particular. I was at the 34th Street station, right? So I say that because that's
Every
LIRR. That's every train line you can imagine.
right, yeah.
That's everything is happening there, right?
Mhm.
And I remember like the bell went off, right? Ding, some train is coming. But at the same time, the LIR is coming and the Metro North and everything else. You just see everybody just flying past each other. And I was like, whoa, is this the way we've been living? It's like we're in the Matrix, you know? And not to say everybody needs to be full of joy and dancing and running into each other. It
Right.
was just um, such a stern, cold feeling at the time, the way in which it looked.
Mhm.
Everybody was just so inundated on a phone and a cell phone, not even look it up. I'm sure most of us probably feel it in our neck sometimes. And
Right, right.
people spending so much time like this. And
Mhm.
remind me when I first got to my village, and I was walking, and he said, "Why are you walking so fast?" I'm a native New Yorker, so I just go so fast. I
Right,
didn't realize it was fast. Um,
right.
but just the way in which we treat life here sometimes, and not to say we shouldn't have a sense of urgency for it. Because I do not like being late anywhere. I don't, it still is that part of it, that it will bother me even if I'm a couple of minutes late.
Mhm.
Um, but so for example, I lived about 2 hours from the capital. I lived on an island called um, Ingazija is the native word for it, and Grand Comore is the word for it. Comoros is made up of 4 islands. One is still under French rule. And
Mhm.
I was about 2 hours from the capital, the particular village I lived in Uzuwani.
Mhm.
And we would experience a drought sometimes.
Mhm.
And one thing that I remember praying for rain.
Mhm.
Out of all the things in my life that I had prayed for before,
Mhm.
I had never been in a position where I had to pray for rain.
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and I remember just the blessing and the relief that came from it when the rain did come. And so, and I remember when I first came back and I would have the water running in my mind. I was like, oh, is it going to cut off at a particular time? Or
Right, right, right,
what?
right. Mhm.
I was like, oh, is it going to cut off at a time? And I remember my village at the time wasn't getting electricity frequently. But
Mhm.
you have people who use generators, solar power, certain places where you could charge up.
Mhm.
I remember the joy that kids would experience when they knew the lights was on and
Right.
favorite TV show,
Wow. Wow.
or when it would rain and they would go outside and dance in the rain.
Mhm.
And it just and some might say, "Oh, what that sounded like it was pretty rough." It just reminded me of the many joys we experience in life. I had an amazing time there,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
never once did I say, "Oh, I need to leave because I don't have electricity for 2 hours."
So you adapted to the whole lifestyle. How long were you there? A year?
Oh no, I was there for 27 months. I was there
Wow.
for
Oh,
a
wow.
little
More
over 2 years.
than over 2 years.
A little over 2 years after I had
Mhm.
finished my time in Comoros too, I did a Southern Africa trek.
Mhm.
To about 9 other countries during that trek as well too. Like in Southern Africa, I did a loop there.
Mhm.
So and I had visited twice back here. I had a passing of my uncle, so I came here for that, and then I came for a summertime as well too to visit family for a couple weeks. So other than those 2 times, and then you imagine, so it was about almost 3 years before
Mhm.
I
Wow.
came back to the States.
I didn't realize it, so that's probably why it's been 6 years, right?
Right, yeah.
We were at up
Yeah.
high, right?
Yeah, so I had finished in Comoros in August 2017. And then I
Mhm.
didn't get back into the States until November 2017. So from
Okay.
August to November did a bit of a trek there. And then, like I said, I came and visited twice during
Right.
that time frame.
Mhm. What so as we're talking about this global kids, is that related to this whole what is global kids and talk about what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the way I found out about Global Kids was through the Global Teens program, in which I took young people with the YMCA
Okay.
New York a Global Teen program. There were
Mm-hmm.
some young people in there who were also global kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so even then, I was thinking about the idea of working with global kids. I said, you know, because it still would give me opportunity. I would be in New York. I could expand upon some of my work and passion projects of mine. And it came down to, should I go to Global Kids? Should I go to Peace Corps? And it was so interesting. When I came back from Peace Corps, I was looking at another organization. I had met someone else who was a returned Peace Corps volunteers through online before, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just in our Black Peace Corps volunteer group that exists.
Mm-hmm.
And she was working for Global Kids at the time. She had previously worked for another youth development organization who was hiring at the time. And I said, hey, can I speak to you about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could tell you about it. She was like, well, why not Global Kids? I said, well, Global Kids doesn't has any full-time employment right now. You know, I've been back for a little bit. I'm ready to get back into the workforce here in the States because there was a possibility I might travel back overseas and work. So I wanted to take a couple of months to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, no, you know, I made this decision. And she says, I said, well, Global Kids doesn't have full-time employment right now. She called me back the next day. She says, apply, apply. A position just opened up for full-time employment.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Global Kids, it's an organization that's been existing for over 30 years, based in New York City, working in all five boroughs well as Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
We have the opportunity to serve thousands of young people. And the idea is we want them to educate, activate, inspire. We do that for them, and then they can also do that for their peers and within their community. We say think global, but act local. So around global education, leadership, human rights, social justice initiatives. So we do that in ways of workshops. We also do international travel. Young people go to the climate change summit every year. So some went to Egypt
Mm-hmm.
this past November, and it really is beautiful to see the peer-led pieces that they're able to do as well too in that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really exciting to I didn't know about the program, right? And to know it's been around for 30 years, right? And so like black people too, it's been accessible all 30 years. We have like a good number of diversity within the global kids.
Yes, absolutely. Because, you know, Global Kids is in all five boroughs, mostly working with public school students.
Okay.
You know, and that was the thing about it, right? People would think, oh, look at these young kids, you know, from these communities, these areas, and identify as Black and Latino.
Hmm.
How would they take on to global issues, you know, and they realized some of the things that they had experienced, they could connect to what's happening around the world. There is another program that I would say too that I'm connected to, which is the Black Birthright Program.
Hmm.
um, and that's where we take young people to Senegal every summer, and that also is connected to Global Kids. That's one of our partners.
Hmm.
And we do a salon series with young people on every other Sunday, in which they do a deep dive into works around the African diaspora, going all the way back to ancient Egypt and up until today's time.
Hmm.
So as far as is it accessible to Black people and Black students, absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm. That's good. That's good. That's exciting to hear that, there are programs there because we talk about black and brown kids, and mostly you hear about the dangers and the negativity that's going on, right? And so to hear that they are involved in global issues and there are programs for them that could support them in exploring all the different things that they want to. I think it must be tough for youth right now in just choosing with so many choices and so many things out there, choosing what's next for them. We were also talking about youth and spirituality.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
What have you seen in your involvement with youth around religion and spirituality?
Yes, especially on the helms of COVID-19 pandemic and us still being in the midst of that. A lot of young people had to do some deep digging and diving into self to help to get them through what they were experiencing and facing. And also, they experienced something that we didn't have to experience, right? Which was trying to graduate from high school in the middle of a world pandemic,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
we're talking about young people, some who spent almost 2 years outside of a school building and now going back, starting and of course times everybody has experienced something different, but I think it's quite quite an assessment to say that what they've experienced these past few years, the norm being to see a mask other than a smiling face on a daily, and just that entire shift. And how do you engage with people now, with the idea, like, someone might be offended, someone may not be offended, someone might say, oh, I haven't quite been feeling well. How are you feeling now? And the skepticism that now is in place there. So there's been a lot of conversation around mental health, which, wasn't always the case. There wasn't a lot of conversations about mental health in the past. It just wasn't, right?
Right. No.
And these young people, they advocate for themselves when it comes to that as well too. A lot of
Mhm,
them will
mhm,
say, hey, I'm not feeling my greatest, or they will come to you for resources. And you
mhm,
will find that a lot of them, especially if they attend a church that is focused on service, they're like hooked into church now and serving and
mhm,
and
mhm.
wanting to do those things. And like you said, these are the things we don't really get to hear about.
Right. No, we don't.
Things- These are the things that I'm seeing with young people.
Mhm,
It was a
mhm,
group of young girls that I worked with too. They used to be a little upset, and people wanted to give them all type of labels because what we also don't talk about as much too is push out culture, and that's the criminalization that they try to put on Black girls, Black and Latino
mm,
girls.
What's that now? Push out?
Push out culture is
I don't
what
know
it's
about that.
called.
Mhm,
And Ayanna Presley, she's done a lot of work around legislation to focus on exactly
mhm,
that.
mhm,
But it's looking at the suspension rates and the discipline
mhm.
actions for African American girls is skyrocketing.
Really?
But it's not a conversation piece.
It's not a conversation at all,
And
right?
they get labeled as sassy and having
Mm,
attitudes and having all this, right?
mhm, mhm,
And it's just they get this negative label now hanging around their head and trying to navigate through those things, right? And so
mhm,
it's like they now are even aware of these things because of the conversation that's happening. And
mhm,
so I say that as far as spirituality, and so they focus on, oh, I'm not feeling angry, I'm not feeling frustrated, and it's not me. How do I work through this?
mhm,
What do I do about this? And then not only that, they're saying, how do I then teach other young people to do that? So that group of girls who has started to get those labels from other people, they said, hey, test time is coming up.
mhm,
Can we do something about de-stress before the test?
mhm, mhm,
Wellness stations set up. Can we
mhm,
help people select a playlist? Can we
mhm,
do art expression?
mhm,
So that whole sense of identity, knowing who you are and whose you are, and being in touch and understanding the part of practices and being connected to someone, it definitely I would even argue that now people are exploring that at a younger age. You find
Mhm.
many people that go, "Oh, I found God at older years of my
Yeah,
age."
right. And I found, and that's what I was thinking. We were talking
Mhm.
about how, it's not about having prayer in the church, right? I mean, in school, it's not about that, but it's about listening to kids and finding out what they need, right? And finding out what's going to support them. So, what does it look like to have that shift in education? That's the thing that I think about. You may have pockets like the people that you're with. You guys are really conscious of giving them that base or making sure they're heard and supporting them in their goals. How do we roll this out though to the whole general, population, right?
Yes.
And that's how I think on the education level, because when I grew up, we were forced to go to church. So you got it just by sitting there, right?
Mhm, mhm,
You got
mhm.
something, right? And
Right.
now it's
Yeah.
shifting so much.
It is indeed shifting. And I mean, I think it goes back to when you hear some people who they don't want to be it's older people too, or or some I would say, 30s and 40s, especially like that age range, where they
Mhm.
go, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with church." They had such negative experiences of maybe somebody.
And I asked them too, what about your kids, right? So those
Yeah,
are the conversations I have.
right.
And you know what I was getting though is this general sense of I'm teaching them love.
Yes.
And so that it's interesting.
Yeah. And this is where I say, I listen to some people's stories of what they experience. I say, for me, I have very different experience growing up though in church and as it related to spirituality.
Mhm.
Growing up in Reverend Ike's church, we were told at a very young age, you could be what you want to be, do what you want to do, and have what you want to have.
I listened to Reverend Ike from Memphis, Tennessee. Right back. We used to listen to Reverend Ike on Sunday. So it's really interesting that I end up in going to the church
Yes.
as Xavier.
Right.
But
Right.
I remember very young on the radio every Sunday, Reverend Ike really told you you can have in
Yes.
anything you want, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, so we start off with that point, right? I literally grew up knowing and believing that. And other people say, "Oh, no, I was told I had to do this, I had to do that, and I was going to go to hell. And do
Right.
that, hell.
Mhm.
If I do that, I think I did that, I'm still going to go to hell." I said,
Wait, I told one person you didn't really believe you were going to hell because you kept doing it. Because after you tested it and you didn't really go to hell, right?
right. I said, "Well, or hell must be a little further than I thought it was."
How far can I go before I really get to hell, right?
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
you know.
And even with that, I grew up, I had a copy of a Bhagavad Gita in the house. There was a Quran in
Mm,
my house, because there was a
mm,
time in which my mother was with the Nation of Islam. And it was
yeah.
something I could talk about in church.
Mhm,
We could talk about practices from Hinduism or other practices that people had.
mhm.
So I never was taught either that other people's practices or spirituality was something that was creepy or
Yeah,
scary.
right, 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 right. That like the only like Christianity, the only way was Jesus Christ and the Holy Bible. You were never taught that that was the only way.
Yeah, and I had to know that God was within me, and I had to know God for myself.
Yeah.
And of course, it was important to know Scripture, and it was important to know about these different things.
Mhm,
But the connection that you had to who you are and whose you are,
mhm,
and experiencing God, right? That had to be a very personal thing. I learned that at a very young age.
mhm.
So I'm very grateful for that because there's a lot of hurt or trauma or unlearning many had to do to
Yeah.
get to that place, and that they still. So when I tell people, and they go, "What?" And some people are shocked. You're a minister. What does that mean? And are you a nun? I said, no, I'm not a nun. I'm not identified as a nun or anything
The
like that.
same.
So that's
Well,
like,
I'm an interfaith into spiritual minister.
yes,
So people think I'm a preacher, and I will have this joke where they think I'm at the pulpit just throwing down, and I'm really not, right? I'm just supporting people in your spiritual growth, right? Let me support
right, right.
you,
Hey,
right?
and listen, sometimes I have been at the pulpit throwing down.
I know I've seen you, right?
Sometimes I blessed the baby. I went and I blessed the house 3 weeks ago.
I know, right?
And
And you know what's interesting?
unintentional.
I've done a couple of weddings myself, and
Yeah,
it takes work. It's
yeah,
exciting too, but there's a lot that goes into creating a
yeah,
wedding for
yeah.
people. And I remember one of my weddings was interfaith. We did like 5 different things, right? From every religion you can imagine, right? So it was cool, right, to see the mix, right, to see how they were able to appease his Christian family, right, and
Mhm,
then all of her interfaith beliefs and spiritual
mhm.
practices. So we did a lot of different practices in that wedding. So as a minister, and I know what you're saying because I was ordained. I went to seminary for 2 years, right?
Mm.
And I'm associated with one spirit. The whole way you say you
Okay.
have to be associated, that's no longer, you don't have to do that anymore to do
Mhm.
weddings, right? You can
Right.
go and get your certification and marry a lot of people. But planning a wedding is work, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's work. And even when I went to school, I never knew what a reverend was. How in the end, how would I be a reverend? I was just fascinated by studying all the different religions
Yeah.
and understanding because I'd only known Christianity. So I was
Right.
fascinated to do the practices and study all of them. And in the end, I was like, a reverend, right? And what does that mean, right?
Right.
So
Right.
just really stepping into just being of service and what that looks like for me, Reverend G, it looks like for me and stepping into that, like you said, knowing who we are, what we get to share, right? And we get there. And it took years though. And my thing is to catch young people, right? Before
Yeah.
it takes years, right? To know who you are, like you said, before you 40, right? Or
Right. Right.
older, right? How
Yeah.
do we get our young people on that path of self-worth, on that path of releasing trauma? And there's so much trauma going on. How do we heal them at a young age? Or,
It's such a great question, and it really goes back to, like you said, just listen. Got to start off by listening.
mhm, mhm,
That's it. That's a
mhm,
lot of time, and a lot of times that's the one thing that many people probably say about their childhood too, right? Who
mhm,
have experienced hurt and or even grief sometimes, and they said, "Well, no one was listening to me." And
mhm, mhm.
like anybody was listening.
Right.
He wasn't. I would. And so the minute that because something shuts down within people when they feel
Mhm,
that way, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
they walk around in the world and they decide to adapt a particular attitude or spirit about it because their experience with interacting with people is that people don't listen to them.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's interesting. Let's see how would you, if you were to speak to a group of educators on spirituality in the school,
Mm.
what do you think that conversation might look like?
And I think that conversation would start off with number one. Sometimes what I like to do with educators
Mhm.
is have them put themselves back into those shoes.
Mm, mhm,
Sometimes
mhm,
we get very far removed
mhm.
from, oh yeah, when I was
Yeah.
12 years old, I thought
Yeah.
I felt this way, and they say, oh, these young people. Okay, well, young people isn't new. That's been a thing since
Forever.
the inception of people, right?
Right, right, right.
or the different ideas and concepts, it's a cell phone now, right? But
Right.
what was it? A video game, right? When they first came out with a Nintendo,
Exactly.
or wanting to play
It's different.
outside and talk
Yeah.
to friends, right? So always you think of all these young people want to do is X, Y, and Z, and you
Right.
just go into the bank. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I said sometimes you'd be so surprised if you just pour into them, continue
Mm-hmm.
to pour into them and remind them of the truth of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I tell you this too, a lot of times if you want to continue to put labels upon young people, all they want to do, or they're gonna be like, actually, I'm reading a book on my phone. I'm not even on Instagram
Right.
and Snapchat
Right.
like you.
Exactly. Right.
But they have the attitude, well, if that's what you think, so be it. And that just shows me how much you don't want to know me or want to get to know me, and how much I'm sitting here trying to develop and evolve. And and this whole idea about knowing oneself too, we're ever evolving too, even in
Right.
our adult years. But that sense of purpose and pride comes from some place.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and I know, people say, I don't care what people think. Those are usually the people who care the most.
The ones that say, "Oh, I don't care," right? Those are the ones, right? That care the most. Yeah, it. I love that. I've always had a passion for supporting you, right?
Yeah.
And so that you're actually in there with them, right? It's really inspiring to kind of, because I think about what shifts do we have to make, and having people in there who are willing to make those shifts and on a broad community base,
Yes.
right? Being in the community, doing programs in the community where you can catch more students. And you had mentioned earlier where you said, oh, Black and brown students in this community, they don't care about global warming, but they actually do. Or they
Mhm.
don't care about the issues other than like in their current day to day living, they actually do. And being able to have resources for them,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? To
Yes.
explore that.
And also, sure, it is that part where you're introducing new concepts or maybe some things they don't know or haven't seen, or some things they'll gravitate towards and be a little more interested in. But one thing I realized too, because sometimes people say, oh, the student interest. If you start with a genuine connection that you are
Mm,
making, as it is with anyone else, you
mhm,
start with that general connection, it could just take you so many different places to new heights. You could have
mhm,
so many different conversations, because honestly, sometimes I've told my young people, hey, listen, we have Justice Sonia Sotomayor who's coming, or we have a diplomat who's coming to speak about. They may not always know the ins and outs of it, right? Because
mhm,
they trust me, or they trust the other adults who are in their life and is saying, hey, this is something I think you should really look into. They'll
mhm.
say later, well, hey, I only went because you said it might be pizza there. And I said, okay, I guess there's something
But
important,
you learned something, you got something.
it puts them in a way or a pathway and go, like you said, they start learning something, or it's more than what they expected it would be. And
Mhm,
that's what we have to think when we deconstruct this whole idea of, I'm trying to tell them something that will change their life and help them and not make the
mhm,
mistakes I made. Nobody wants to be treated or feel as though something's being forced and imposed upon them.
mhm,
But how do you tell people about something could help them? It's
mhm.
not in a forceful way. It's not in a way of sales, marketing, persuasion either.
Right, 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 right. And two, I feel for the parents too. I always think about the parents during this time also, and dealing with the shift that happened for them during COVID, and what that whole thing and the impact on the kids based on the whole 2 year shutdown, the impact on the parents. I always say, what's out there for the parents, right? What's out there
Right,
supporting them?
right.
Because there was a lot of breakdown there,
Oh,
that
yes.
of course impacted, the kids. So there are a lot of areas where I say we can make a difference or support people in getting to accessing some joy in their life, right?
Absolutely.
Finding some practice.
Absolutely. Making connections. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing sometimes. Making connections. There was a
Connect.
lot of disconnect that came. And then a lot of connection as well too, right? You found some people after a while, once we started to navigate what could happen, a lot of communities that came together virtually, or
The
people
habit.
noticed, oh, now every week we're meeting at this time because we didn't have to coordinate. Oh, you live 3 hours away, you live 2 hours away.
Exactly.
Let's come together, right? There were a
Yeah.
lot Zoom calls that were
Mhm.
happening where people could do check-ins with people. But
And it's like I said, community, as you said,
yes,
connections and
yes,
community.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and it's so needed, like you said, the parents need it, the children need it, everybody in between needs it because we all are in communication and in this experience with one another.
Hmm.
And we're going to connect. And will disconnects happen? Sure.
Yeah,
That's natural, will happen sometimes, right?
exactly.
Um,
Um, I wanted to. We're getting really into almost ending, right? But what I like for my guests to share, we talk about the spiritual toolkit, right?
mm,
What are your what would be your top three spirit go-to practices that support you?
well, that's a really good one. As far as reading, study guide. The study guide in the Bible, of course,
Mhm,
too.
mhm,
As far as reading, there's a word sometimes you just say, lead me to the right page, or
mhm, mhm, mhm,
and I hold up the study guide because we know it incorporates Bible verses in there. We know it incorporates affirmations,
mhm,
visualization techniques,
mhm.
um, breathing.
Mm.
Sometimes we have no idea and realize how we're even breathing sometimes.
I know. We take it so for granted breathing, man.
Yes, yes. So
Oh man.
so I have this eucalyptus oil,
Mhm.
peppermint oil, also with Lisa Fry.
You said, yeah, I know these.
Lisa, she has the oils that she works with too, with some beautiful blends. That
Hmm.
can just
Young living, right?
young living,
Yeah.
yes. Just
Yeah.
take a minute and just reset,
Hmm.
put you back in touch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I like to do yoga. And
Mm.
I never really gone to a lot of yoga classes or anything of that sense. Just being able to breathe, stretch, be somewhere, just take some time to slow down and do that.
Mhm.
Um, that's really big for me. Journaling, I know I
Mhm.
done passed my 3 now.
I know we have and as I said though, you do different ones at different times, though,
Yes.
right? Sometimes like the journaling is like always on, right? Then you take a break
Yes.
and do some reading, right? And doing devotionals and affirmations in the study guide, right? It's like
Yes.
the morning practices. And as I talk about all the time kind of accessing the joy, one of
Mhm.
the quickest ways I found to access it is through gratitude.
Yes.
Right? If you
Yes.
can, whenever you are, wherever you are, right? If you can in that moment find something to be grateful for, because when you start spiraling down into negativity, you like build and you're underwater and you're drowning. If you could just start spiraling back up, it's the
Mhm.
same effect of spiraling. So that was one of the practices I love, is gratitude, because it's in the moment, it's right there, and you could get it done.
Yeah, I remember during the pandemic where, it was just it was rough for a lot of people. That was just what they were experiencing and feeling for numerous reasons,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to, especially my staff, my team, and I said to a few other people, I said, let me tell you something. If you opened your eyes this morning,
Mm-hmm.
that means God counted you in for another day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you might have been feeling or experiencing the day before, I said, especially during this time, I said, how many people were it who didn't even get to open their eyes up, right? We started off, we just heard of a few cases, hundreds of cases, thousands of cases, right?
Yeah.
About it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Opened
Then
your
people
eyes.
all around you start going, right? And then that was even deeper when the people right close to you started going, right?
And you would, and guess what? You would lay down and you would wake up and your eyes were open though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What a moment to just give gratitude for knowing you got counted in a number for another day.
Yes.
Breath in your body and that reminder that your work isn't done.
Yeah.
So if you opened your eyes, that means your work here is not done as of yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the gratitude, yes, I give thanks for the breath in my body, even like we said,
Mm-hmm.
just we take for granted sometimes these things that we have. And like I told you, the rain. I never thought I had to pray for rain.
Yeah, right. No, right.
I had this feeling of gratitude before,
Mm-hmm.
but then when it was things like thanking God for rain,
Yeah. Yeah.
or these things where before we would see as an annoyance or a frustration to slow down things, but now you can have a different perspective to say, wow,
Uh-huh.
this is something used to give life or
Yeah.
give a fresh, clean slate, wipe away things and bring upon new things.
Yeah.
Um, And this is the day that the Lord has made. We shall rejoice and be glad in
It's
it.
right in it, right? Do you this will be the last thing. Peace Corps volunteers, do you recruit for that or
I help to speak at some of the recruitment events that they have
oh
sometimes
okay.
for it. Yeah, they have
Mhm.
recruitment events, and someone sends me a message. Sometimes they go, "Hey, I know that you say you a Peace Corps volunteer. Can you talk to me?" I'm like, "Absolutely."
Mhm.
I love talking about it. I remember before I left, there was someone who said to me, "Oh, I think about Uganda every day." And I said to myself, I said, "How do they think about a place every day that was outside?" And then it wasn't until I said, "Wow, that's not far fetched now, is it?"
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so like I said, I'm a Franklin H. Williams award winner. I also was what was called a Peace Corps volunteer leader
Mhm.
my last few months while I was in country, where I was able to help the training staff to incorporate additional training topics that I found would be conducive to the training experience and help to involve those pieces and did some observations for those who are going to be receiving their Teach English as a Foreign Language
Mhm.
certificate. So yes,
Mhm.
and we're in the middle of Peace Corps. Peace Corps week just passed, and there's going to be some
Okay.
events throughout the month of March as well too for it.
I'll probably pay more attention to it now that I've talked to you about it,
Yes,
right? Because so many things go in your world, right? What are you paying attention to,
right.
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I didn't know about too was Peace Corps response, which is where you can go somewhere for 3 to 12 months as well too. It could be a
Mm,
which is very different,
different,
than a
right?
7 month experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it is for those who may have more experience in a particular field and they need technical assistance for certain things and where your work will really be impactful in a short period of time, but intentional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are even like 3 month assignments that are connecting to the Peace Corps as an organization.
Let me ask you though, how do you get paid?
That's a good one. Yes. So it is a volunteer.
Yeah, I keep hearing volunteer, volunteer in my mind. I was
Yes,
like, what?
it is indeed volunteer experience, but you do receive a stipend when you're there.
Oh, okay.
The stipend, like I said, is not anything where you are able to and this is the thing, it's based off of the standards in which the country in which you're living in sometimes, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So it will cover food or clothing allowance, those things of the nature too. So
mhm.
even that, and some might say, well, did that feel like you were living in lack? It didn't, because I don't have a lack concept in my mind.
Right.
I was able to
Mhm,
have everything I needed.
mhm.
And one thing that I didn't try to do is think I was still in New York City,
Yeah, right. Right. You tried to adjust your lifestyle, right?
Yes,
To
yes.
where you were. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is it the worst thing in the world that I was 15 minutes from the beach and fresh water and the whitest sand you could find? No. you know,
Right, exactly. The advantages of it all.
right. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I had saved up before I left, and
Mhm,
like I said, sold my car, things of that nature. I wanted to make sure that I was prepared that if at any time I needed to go on my own and not have to wait for anybody to foot any bill or any finances for me, that I had that.
mhm,
And because I was conscious of my spending with certain things, I was able to save from that. And you do get a readjustment allowance as well too when you do return, where they give you a certain sum of money to help you
mhm.
readjust to coming back
Oh,
to
okay.
the
Yeah,
state.
that's good information to know for people, right?
Yes,
Because I kept hearing volunteer. Well, I am so excited that you were able to join me today on
yes,
Conversations with Reverend G. And I see you on Facebook and I follow you, so we'll be in touch, right? And
absolutely.
keep spreading that joy and sharing with you.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. This has been a beautiful experience and conversation. I know it took us a minute to nail down the
I
date,
know, right? But we got it.
but we got it. We got it together.
We
And I
did.
appreciate you for that as well too. So
Thanks.
thank
Have a
you so
good
much for this wonderful experience. And yes, we absolutely will stay in touch, Reverend G.
one. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. And you can find me every Monday night at 8 p.m. on WEMS Live. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So join us every Monday night. And you can find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta with inspirational messages to support you throughout your day. And as I said, I am here to support you in accessing joy and living your best life with grace and ease. I will see you again right here next week, 8 p.m. on WEMS Radio. Have a blessed, positive week.